Welcome back once again to Biscuits and Gravy. This is pretty soon after the last one, pretty short gap, but we're very excited about these videos, so we're probably going to be putting them out fairly regularly over the course of the next few weeks or months or however long. But yeah, today we are talking about the character of Éponine, focusing on the songs On My Own and A Little Fall of Rain. Sort of like last time where we talked about a character's solo and their death song. That is what we're doing again. And if you hear any noise in the background, then that's just our cats. They're being very annoying tonight. So we apologize if you hear that. So On My Own is quite possibly the most famous solo from the show. The only one probably competing with it would be I Dreamed a Dream. And so a lot of people have heard it and sang it, and I know it's very popular as like an audition song when girls want to try out for various musical theater parts. And it's become very popular and one of the most well-known songs from the show. And I think one of the reasons for that is because a lot of people can empathize with having like an unrequited love. I personally can't empathize with that because that just hasn't happened to me yet. But I think even for people who don't have that situation where like they haven't had an unrequited love, just about everyone can empathize with being lonely and feeling unwanted and that sort of thing.
Or at least having a crush on somebody.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be a massive, attraction, but still, it's enough in the story that it's pretty significant.
Yeah. And so to kind of dig into the song a little bit, I think this song serves an interesting purpose in that it's what really gets you to empathize with Éponine, because you've seen her a little bit prior to this, and you've kind of seen how she feels about Marius, but this is the song that like really lets you in on her suffering that she's been going through because of just her whole life and everything. So kind of the structure of the song, I think, makes its point very well. And this is probably like basic songwriting and not that like revolutionary necessarily, but I wanted to talk about it anyway because I think it's interesting. So at the opening of the song, I guess there's a little bit like a preamble, prologue type thing, but technically where people say the song actually starts is right here. And there's that sort of kind of like twinkling melody, which we hear at other points in the show, but we're not really going to get into those right now. And it feels like very calm and peaceful. It kind of echoes the rain that she talks about later, and you can tell that she's very much in a happy place whenever she's imagining that Marius is with her, and she outlines how he literally impacts how she views the world around her. She's describing the things around her in these very like poignant, poetic terms, and just seeing everything as being very beautiful as long as she's imagining that he's with her. But then the music kind of shifts when she starts admitting, like, I know this isn't real, it's just in my mind and everything, and so it becomes like a little more serious. But she isn't really ready to fully admit the truth to herself, it's like she says, so the melody from before comes back, and it's changed a little bit. It's not quite as optimistic sounding as it was before because she's kind of being forced to accept this truth more and more. I love him, but when the night is over. The music really starts to build up, and I feel like it kind of soars around her, and it could be seen as sounding kind of triumphant, but I feel like it's supposed to be a little more like overwhelming with how she kind of has to accept this truth that she doesn't want to accept, and she's just, crying out all of her pain and suffering under the weight of this truth. I especially like this part right here. So of course she has like her big belting note. And then the music kind of like cuts out for a second, and that melody from before comes back, and it seems like Éponine's like she's trying one more time to kind of protest against this unfairness, because it is kind of unfair that, you love someone, they love you back. Obviously, she's in no way entitled to Marius, but still, like I said, you can definitely sympathize with her. So she sings, 3 more times, I love him, and it feels like she's kind of being resolute in that. It's like she still loves him, but also at the same time, there's sort of a despair and a resignation there, especially in the last line.
I love him, but only on my own.
And I find it interesting that the music like cuts out, like I guess it doesn't cut out, but like it ends there. Like her voice is the last thing you hear. There isn't any sort of continuation because it's just there isn't any continuation to be had there. It's the truth, and that's the end.
Yeah, and an interesting part too is you talked about in a different time with me about the brass overtones that come in during that triumphant sounding point in the song.
Yeah, a little more triumphant.
And I'll talk a lot more about brass in my favorite song, which you have to just wait.
Yes, it's coming. Be ready for it.
To know about. But that placement of brass in the song to me signifies kind of an inner struggle that she's dealing with. You know, she wants Marius, and she understands. Although I guess in 19th century France, you had a lot of class distinctions. It wasn't quite a caste society like you might have seen in a country like India or in the Middle East. But there are definite separations between the people who had means and status and those who didn't.
Yeah,
and,
especially because Marius is he's a baron technically. That isn't really mentioned in the musical, but it is a case in the book. And it's funny that you mentioned that because in the book, when Marius wants to marry Cosette, obviously because he isn't in love with Éponine, he like goes to his grandfather, who's important in the book, is not in the musical at all. But I think he was kind of making that point of like the woman who I want to marry isn't like, you know, she's a nobody. She came from nothing. She doesn't have any sort of social standing or anything. And I forget exactly what he's going with there, but I remember his grandfather just says, "Oh, we'll just keep her as a mistress." And Marius is supremely offended and leaves immediately.
Yeah. Which reminds me of something I wanted to bring up about Éponine's attraction to him. And in the book, she's nothing like, I shouldn't say nothing.
She's quite different. And I don't want to fully get into like the adaptation and everything here. It's worth mentioning, certainly.
So in plain terms, you know, she's a girl from the streets. Her father is Thénardier, who is a wicked scoundrel and not likable in the least. The comic presentation of him in the musical is one thing, but his character in the book is truly despicable. And he has abused her in the things that he's made her do to, you know, work in this so-called family business of crime. And she has a spark of goodness. And she's attracted to Marius in the book. It's plain to me she's attracted to him because of his virtue.
Yeah, and I think even more so in the musical.
Yeah, well, the way she's, you know, the book is more detailed, but she's clearly treated by men in the book as, you know, as a. I guess I'm going to use some kind of like some words here that aren't so offensive, but she's
I think she's just always been used by people essentially for whatever reason. She's always being used by people.
And when she comes to Marius for the first time she comes to his apartment, and they describe her, and she's disheveled and dirty, and clothes are hanging off of her, and
unlike every woman who has ever played her on Broadway, she is not drop dead gorgeous and does not sing like an angel.
So but he's nothing but a gentleman.
Yes.
He really is, and he's kind to her, he's generous to her, he gives her money. And even later in the story when they meet in public, she's very careful to keep her distance from him so that his reputation isn't sullied by being close to her in any way, giving the appearance that they're together. So she's very much attracted to him because he's a gentleman. He is attractive, and he is wealthy. Not wealthy, but he's a man he's a man of means, he's a student and all that. But more than anything, she sees the virtuous man that he is, which I think is awesome because in so many stories, especially in modern storytelling, movies and what have you, men are idiots. Okay, and attractions and relationships between men and women are so
they're based just physical.
They're physical and they're shallow. And she's truly desiring something deep within him that is good and wholesome.
I think much more so within the musical, because in the book it is clear Éponine is not all there in the book, and she seems to have much more of an obsession with Marius than a genuine attraction towards him. And I think in the musical, for whatever reason that they chose to do this, they made her much more sympathetic, and that it's clear she is completely genuine in her love for Marius, and she doesn't do anything to try and sabotage his relationship with Cassette in any way. And she's, I guess, a little bit more pure-hearted of a character within the musical.
Yeah, and they're more fully developed in the musical as friends.
Yeah, I think
they're already friends.
I think that was a nice thing
that
for them to do.
takes things along. It doesn't bog the story down.
Yeah, it kind of helps us understand just their relationship much easier from the get-go, because obviously the musical has to be shorter because the book is 1,000 pages long, and I think it helps us get more invested in them just because they clearly already have that relationship with each other. I think we're about finished with On My Own. I think it's worth taking a little time to talk about performance, just because this is one of the most popular songs in the show. As you could easily guess, you're probably not surprised that it's 25th anniversary clips that I'm using within this video. Samantha Barks is my favorite Éponine. And I think one of the reasons I like her as Éponine, she does sad Éponine very well. And I feel like if you're going to play this character, then, like, I guess the bare minimum that you have to do is to be sad. But I think just she pulls it off very well, and her anguish comes across very well throughout the song.
And I was shocked. I really almost was shocked to learn that she was only 20 years old when she sang that, and I was just going, wow, that is just pure talent.
Yes.
Not that any of the other Éponines aren't good, they all are.
Yes.
I liked, from the 10th anniversary, I really liked
Lea Salonga, yes. Obviously, she's a very iconic one, a lot of people's favorite. She's really great.
Yeah. To me, I could take or leave them as
like
as far as they're both very good and to me equivalent performers.
And Shawneko as well. I hope that's how her name is pronounced in the stage concert. She's good as well. Generally speaking, I find that British Éponines are better than the ones I've seen that are American, except for Lea Salonga, although she's Filipino technically. So is that except for Brynn Lark, I liked her as Éponine. She was in the Broadway revival. But anyway, just wanted to talk a little bit about the performance before we move on. So all of that set up with Éponine's character and how sad and lonely and desperate and longing she is gets, I guess, sort of paid off in some ways. This is in her death song, "A Little Fall of Rain," which is obviously the conclusion to her character arc because it's a conclusion to her life. Again, the circumstances are a little bit different from how they are in the book, because in the book she explicitly saves Marius's life. She doesn't really do that in the musical, which I do think is kind of a pity. I feel like they could have done something to make it where she does actually save his life, and she doesn't just die basically by accident, which I don't think it cheapens her death necessarily, but it does kind of detract from it a little bit. But the thing that I find very interesting about A Little Fall of Rain is how in many ways peaceful it is, despite the fact that she's dying. And this is something that we'll talk about a little bit more in another video that we make, but something I find very interesting about this whole show and about Éponine's character in particular is how I feel like Les Miserables really highlights how hope and grace can be found even in the midst of suffering. So obviously Éponine is in a lot of pain in this song because she's just been shot in the chest, but she has this very calm demeanor throughout most of it. And there's something that a lot of actresses bring in their performance where sorry about that. Where they'll be like visibly in pain. Usually they'll be like gasping or convulsing or something, but still insisting that I don't feel any pain. And a lot of people say that's like she's trying to protect Marius, because Marius is obviously very distressed within this song. And I think it could be seen kind of both ways, where she is in pain but also she isn't. I think there's an interesting kind of paradox within this song where you know, she's dying, but also it's the happiest moment of her life. And like she seems kind of childlike in the song, but she also seems to kind of have a wisdom in a way, in the way that she speaks about things. And she's very at peace with her own death. And I think it's interesting when most people talk about death, it's generally not a positive thing because, you know, it's the end of a life, and that's life is what we have. And we all have this kind of natural abhorrence, if you will, to death. But for us especially, as Catholics and Christians, we believe that death is not the end, it's really a beginning in a lot of ways, because we'll be entering into an eternal life, which will be vastly superior to the one that we've had here on earth. And I think that contrast between how death is usually viewed and how it can be to people like us who believe that there's something more in life can kind of be viewed within this song. If that makes sense.
Well, you can say that she spent her last moments precisely where she hoped it could have been spent.
Yeah.
With Marius.
Yeah.
And in the book's a little different because she, like you said, she was obsessed with him.
Yeah.
And she was really kind of hoping they would both die on
Yeah.
barricade,
Yeah.
and that she was content to die first so that she didn't have to see him die.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's maybe a little happiness in that, although,
Yeah.
she, you know, and he went to the barricade because he thought Cassette didn't love him anymore,
Yeah.
and it was a little bit different
Yeah.
from the
There's a lot
the
more-
story in the musical.
It is definitely a little, there's a lot more despair, and it's a bit darker in the book than it is in
Yeah.
the show.
But she is with him when she dies, and
Yes.
that's a great consolation to her.
Yes.
Even though she knew she wouldn't be able to have him.
Yeah, that's one of the
And-
things, there's the line in the song.
The rain that brings you here is heaven blessed.
So there's this whole running motif throughout the song about rain and flowers. So it's not actually raining at this point, there's blood everywhere. So Éponine is either confusing her blood for rain, she either genuinely doesn't realize.
She's delirious.
Yeah, because, I mean, yeah, she's in shock and stuff. So either she genuinely doesn't realize that there's blood everywhere, or she's making a point by referring to her blood as being rain. So when she says that line about the rain that brings you here is heaven blessed, that's you can interpret that as, I'm glad that I'm dying. Like, it's a good thing that I'm dying, which, like, obviously death isn't a good thing, like, just in the fact that, you know, we lose our lives, but also it can be a gift in a way. Like, it sounds bad to say that Éponine was better off dead, but considering the way that her life was and probably how it would have continued, because, like, I mean, she couldn't have Marius, and there probably wouldn't be anyone else that she could have, like...
Yeah,
Yes.
in some strange way, you see a similar kind of despair that, you know, Javert suffered when his world was turned upside down. They both had, he had great hope for catching Valjean, and then everything just exploded. And in her mind, she really can't. I think she knows that she can't have Marius.
Yeah, yeah.
And she has a great hope that they can be together, and she sees the revolt as an escape, kind of
Yeah.
like he's going to go and be part of it, and I'm going to go be part of it, and at least we can go out together.
Yeah, yeah. And I think also she, like, kind of tying into that, she says, like,
A breath away from where you are. I've come home from so far.
I think that's kind of her, like, there is definitely a degree of self-loathing to her character, like we talked about before. She doesn't want to, you know, sully Marius's reputation, and she's kind of seeing herself as being, like, below him and the people like him, but in this, with the kind of the decision that she made, leaving her family behind, and now she's finally, like, he's finally embracing her like she's been dreaming about, she feels like she's finally risen above her parents and her ways, and now she's finally at a place where she's at peace, and probably the happiest moment of her life was her death.
Yeah.
With the music in particular, I don't have as much to say as I did for the last song. Something I do think is interesting is I saw a video where I'll probably put the link in the description, but a guy was talking about how the descending bass is used in songs, especially sad songs, and like that has it has an effect on people to kind of make them cry. So the music of On My Own, which is used in other parts of the show, which are also, you know, sadder parts of the show, it has a descending bass. Whereas A Little Fall of Rain, the music isn't really sad music, and it has an ascending bass, not a descending one, which I think kind of highlights how it's not, like, it is sad, but it also isn't that sad for Éponine, at least. She's not sad about it.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting you talk about the descending bass. You're not talking about Dr. Peter Craft, are you?
No.
Okay. He's a professor of philosophy at Boston College, I think. And he may not be teaching anymore, but I did listen to a lecture of his where he talked about truth and just certain things in nature and in creation that are obvious, and they work with us and our sensibilities as humans.
Yeah.
We're wired that way, and that was his point, talking about certain conventions that we can create and change and adjust and things like that in life, but there's other things in creation that are fixed. And one
Like
of
how
the
Pippin will always whine.
yes, exactly. And one of the things he mentioned was that music that is uplifting is always the music is always an ascending major chord, and music that is depressing and deflating is always in a descending minor chord. And it's funny that you said that. That's a truth.
Yeah.
When you hear music that everybody in the world that hears it feels the same way,
Yeah.
it's truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing here.
Yeah.
It's depicting it's conveying the feeling that we should feel that's going to take place in the story. The music is just it's the thrust that pushes us there.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, like, the atmosphere of the song is very quiet and peaceful and sort of lullaby-like. Like, at the end of the song, Marius just kind of, like, rocks her to sleep, essentially. And I think it kind of it fits the whole feel of the song very well, that even though it is, you know, tragic that she's dying at such a young age, especially after she's had such a hard life, but in a way, this is a gift to her. There is a line in the book actually referring to Fantine's death, but it says, death is the entry to light everlasting, which, at least for what we believe, it is. And Éponine, obviously, she's, you know, a very tragic character. Her life was incredibly unfair. You know, she didn't ask to be born to such awful people who raised her in this, you know, terrible lifestyle. And, you know, had things worked out differently, she probably would have, maybe she wouldn't have ended up with Marius, but she could have ended up with some other nice young man who would have treated her well. But I think, like, when it comes to tragedy and stuff, there's the whole, like, problem of evil that people constantly present to those people who believe in a God, of how can God allow suffering to exist, and we don't need to get into that right now. But we believe that God is always able to bring good out of suffering. And I've seen so many people say that, like, generally people who don't believe in a God, that suffering is just suffering. You should not try to find meaning in it, because that's disrespectful, essentially. So, like, they'll say, like, if a person dies and then you try to say, well, because of their death, this good thing happened, so it was good that they died, there was a meaning to it. People will argue that you just shouldn't try to do that because that's disrespectful. But I think it's not so much that someone's death or suffering needed to happen. It's more just you're looking at the good that was still able to happen in spite of that suffering. And we believe that God can always bring goodness out of suffering. So even though Éponine had to die this sad, painful, tragic death, there was a grace there that she had not been able to find anywhere else in the final moments of her life.
Right, and everything we do in our life is a response to something else.
Yeah.
So sometimes you'll never see a response from somebody or in some situation if you're never presented with a new possibility.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what we see with her. I mean,
Yeah.
the tragic getting in, but then you see her response, which is maybe we never would have known how she could ever be that way.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we want to mention the very last verse, or her last words. I think I was kind of in love with you. What was it?
Oh, in the book, her last words are, I think I was a little bit in love with you.
Yeah, and the musical plays that up more.
Yeah.
I think, because
Yeah.
she's kind of obsessed with him with the crazy crush, but then she confesses there as she dies that her love for him,
Yeah.
which we
Yeah.
don't see at all at any other point.
Yeah, I think you see like the attraction that she has, but you don't really see
Yeah.
a genuine love. I mean, she does, lead him to Cassette, and she protects them from her father and his gang, which could be seen definitely as acts of love, but she also
Yeah.
engineered things so that they would both die. So that's not
and-
a very loving thing to do.
And I don't speak French, so I don't know how many words the French have for love.
Yeah.
In English, we suffer from a lack of expression. We
Yeah.
have one word, and it's called
Yeah.
love.
Yeah.
And not in Latin, there are several words.
Yeah.
There's
In Greek,
in Greek, there's other words. So she obviously had a romantic love for him. I mean,
Yeah.
that attraction was there, but she did have maybe even a filial love. You know,
Yeah.
that brotherly love. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, he's
Or
a
like-
he's a real decent guy.
Yeah,
You know,
or like
and-
the agape love, the unconditional.
exactly the
love.
sacrificial love.
Yeah.
And that too.
Yeah, I think especially in the musical, she definitely has that because since she isn't just unhealthily obsessed with him in
Yeah.
the musical, and she not only leads him to Cassette, she also delivers the letter for him, and it seems like within the musical, she is much more willing to just let him be happy with whoever it is that he wants to be happy with,
Yeah.
rather than if I can't have you, no one can.
Yeah, and she might have even seen a wholesome kind of servile love, like she should have had for her father,
Yeah.
because Marius is a man of means that if they'd fallen in love and he took her to be his wife, he would provide for her
Yeah.
and protect her
Yeah.
and be everything that she hoped for.
Yeah, yeah. I was kind of wondering about the whole the rain will make the flowers grow, because so if we're saying the rain is Eponine's blood, then what are the flowers that she's making grow? Because
Maybe these graces that we're hinting to,
True.
because
I
what's
guess
the expression about the blood of the martyrs?
what in from Do You Hear the People Sing?
Not just there, but in like our Catholic theology.
Yeah.
There's an expression about the blood of the martyrs.
I know there's a line in Do You Hear the People Sing where it says, "The blood of the martyrs will water the meadows of France."
Okay,
That's
maybe,
why- that's why I
maybe
thought I
there's
was saying
something.
that.
Yeah, well,
But
maybe
don't
there's
we
something
see
going
the
on
blood of
there.
the martyrs is like the lifeblood of the church, right?
Yeah. So
Something along those lines,
and you've
yeah.
always heard that expression, that we stand on the shoulders of giants, and we stand up on the ground, and if the blood is like the water, it falls on the ground, and then,
Yeah.
and then we have kind of a legacy of sorts
Yeah,
that she's
yeah.
leaving
And
as part of this entire. Like it's Les Miserables, that's right.
Yeah.
She's one of the
The Miserables.
yeah. She's one of the pitiful, the wretched.
Yeah.
And she's mingling herself with them in this revolt, and we see that there is maybe something that's going to feed a greater coming of some kind of movement in the future.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. And I think since you mentioned it, I realize how that kind of ties into the whole theme I was talking about before, about how there are bad things that happen, but good things still come out of them. Like, rain, like, not everyone sees rain as a bad thing, but generally it's like, we think of good things, like sunshine and clouds and everything, but even though the rain falls, it makes the flowers grow.
Yeah.
And I also thought about, like, even though Éponine does not technically die for Marius in the musical, because she doesn't step in front of the gun for him, she does still sort of die for his sake, and that she came back for him. So you could say the flower she is making grow is Marius's future marriage to Cassette and their
Yeah.
children as well, and all the children know how.
Well said.
Thank you. And this is, I guess, more a sad detail, but so Éponine dies mid-sentence because, that just makes it more tragic. And she doesn't get to say grow because she cuts off make the flowers. And in Gavroche's death scene, her brother,
Which, by the way, that's not clear in the musical.
well, it's not clear. Yeah, no. It's the fact that they're siblings is not clear in the
Yeah.
musical.
But they are.
Yes, they are. So I don't think you've seen this death scene a few times because it's not in the concerts. But Gavroche also gets cut off mid-sentence, and the last word he doesn't get to say is up. So the last two words that the Thénardier children who die prematurely don't get to say is grow up, which is a sad little detail there.
Right, and they didn't. Gosh, they don't even get to be children in that wholesome sense.
Yeah.
They're truly the wretched, and
Yes.
it's because they have sorry parents.
Yeah.
So parents don't.
But I think
don't
that's
mistreat your children.
yes, that's your educational message for the day. But I think that's sort of where, like I said, the grace comes in for people who just, you know, bad things happen to people one way or another, whether we understand why or not. But we believe that our Lord has enough consolation for all the deepest sufferings. And that's a good way for me to segue in, because we'll be talking about it next week, where we'll be talking about more characters who die, and a little bit about the graces that can be found in those deaths as well. So thank you very much for joining us once again in our discussion of songs about Les Miserables. Hopefully everything came across clear. This was sort of supposed to be like my video with more about what I was talking about, so hopefully all of my points kind of came across clearly.
There are more biscuits than gravy in this one.
Yeah, a little bit. But we hope you enjoyed. Leave a comment if you want to, telling us your favorite Éponine, your favorite Marius, and because I didn't get a chance to say this, I really like what Marius can bring to the performance in A Little Fall of Rain, because it isn't just Éponine, because I feel like some Mariuses are really able to nail that sort of like tenderness and care there, and that pulls on my heartstrings. So leave a comment with your favorite Éponine and Marius, or both, or whatever. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.